Welcome to Series 4 of Broadcasting Today. We're talking this evening with Nic Phillips, director of the long-running soap opera Eastenders. All part of our mission here at Middlesex University in London to teach students how to think, but more importantly, how to do. Welcome to the fourth series of Broadcasting Today. And this evening we have Nic Phillips. I think that's worth an extra round of applause, by the way. Nic Phillips of Eastenders, director of the BBC's longest running soap, among other things. Let me start, Nic, by asking you what got you into directing. Lots of people go to art school, don't they, to start off with and potter around a bit. But it seems to me you made a decision pretty quickly that that was the life you wanted.
Not quite, Carl. I started at a college called Ravensbourne,
Which still
exists and has moved close to the O2. But in those days it was in Bromley, and I went in as a graphic design student because I didn't think I could do anything else. I wasn't a very good artist, but graphics was sort of about doing lettering, and I thought I could manage that. And the day I went to look at the college, and this is way before directing, it was just, I didn't even know about television except to watch it since the coronation in 1953, when lots of families got their first TV sets, and my parents became addicted to it, as I did as I grew up. And so when I went to Ravensbourne to do graphics or to look around, is this the place I want to do my degree? They showed me a TV studio where they just started this television course, just 12 students. And I walked into the studio and there was music and cameras and lights. And I thought, this is what I want. This is it. This is exciting.
That sounds like a showbiz moment.
It was a showbiz moment, yes. There wasn't too much glitter, but there was a lot of music and lights. And so I did graphics for a bit. I was on a degree course, but I decided to abandon that. And bless them, my parents allowed me to abandon my degree in favour of this vocational course. And I went from Ravensbourne, didn't qualify, didn't get a degree, didn't get a certificate, got a job before I finished. Went into commercials, then went into movies, worked in movies for a few years in the early 70s, then worked for London Weekend Television as a floor manager, assistant floor manager, location manager, production manager, assistant director. And then in about 78, I just had enough of being the kind of underdog, the guy that was doing the running for the guy that was creating. And there's no doubt that I think, for me, the quality of life is improved by creating something or being at least a participant in the creation of something. So inevitably, I kind of blagged my way into a directing job, was sent off to Ireland to direct kids programme for RTE in Dublin, which was my first freelance directing job. And I did have some help from people who knew people who knew people. And it's still like that today, you know, who you know is really important. And then I came straight back to London Weekend Television in 79, it was late in 79, and worked on a show called The London Programme, which was a current affairs show. With Trevor Phillips. Yeah. And I've just been directing ever since.
But that route you described, that doing virtually every job other than directing, is still pretty much the way it works, is it not? You've got to start and learn the big landscape picture first before you can get to say, well, you decided you want to be a director. Some might decide they don't want to be a director, they want to be a floor manager or whatever else. But you need that route to pick up that experience still, do you not?
I think it's slightly different these days because a bit like education in general, there's an expectation that people will make their choices of future when they're pretty young. And if you really want to be a director, it seems to me that nowadays the successful directors are making that choice very young, but even, do I say unconsciously, they're making, or subconsciously, unconsciously they'd be asleep, wouldn't they? Subconsciously, they are making films for themselves when they're at school. So they have a natural bent towards being a director because they want to create something, they have ideas. The kind of work I do as a director is I'm an interpretive director, so I take somebody else's work, I direct it, and I've always done that. And the route I took into the business was working with TV crews, with producers, directors, artists, and I was learning from them the craft of creation as I was watching other people. I would watch directors and go, I could never do that. How do I deal with the actors, deal with all their script and subtext, and understand all the nuance of what they're having to perform and make, and deal with every single one of these massive egos that's marching around on the stage in front of me, and all the technical kit and all the angles, the geometry that's required, and the sound recording, and keeping everybody on board and doing that. And I never believed I could do it. But as I worked through those craft jobs, I realized actually I knew much more than I thought I knew. And when I finally got to work with a director who I had no respect for at all, I realized it was time for me to make the jump. And I didn't have any respect for him, by the way, only because he didn't really know what he was doing, but he was called a director, and I thought I could do better than that.
So you started off though by saying, I wanted to be a kind of ringmaster. I've done all these other jobs, but actually I wanted to be in charge. So that's one way of looking at it. The other one you've described is you had a vision, you had an aesthetic that you wanted, a creative aesthetic you wanted to play out. Which of those two?
Ooh, yeah, I think the creative aesthetic, the creative ideas, the idea of being part of a creative team and having making a contribution was rewarding, and it became, I kind of understood that later. It was actually wanting to be part of the team and the pleasure of the business of television that really attracted me to it. I mean, I worked on some big movies. I mean, I was a third assistant on Jesus Christ Superstar, I'd seen, and this was 1972, I'd seen, what it was like to be on set with hundreds of people, and I wasn't ready for that. I just knew the whole ambience of being part of this thing was incredibly not boring. And I didn't want to be bored. I'm too impatient to be bored. The creative part of it came much later, and starting off directing kids programs and working with people like yourself, working with journalists, television journalists and
Michael Aspel.
Yes, exactly, writers and lots of creative people. You realise that you do have ideas, and those things came out. But going back to your original question, I didn't make my own film. I did make a film at art college, but I didn't realise it was going to be a contribution. I mean, it was mad, the stupid thing you do as an art student. But it was, I didn't realise it was going to be important.
I have a question as a student, of course. I'm thinking about the future, and I think many of us are thinking about the future and what's going to happen after graduation, and relating this with what you said earlier about getting into the industry and how was it for you to get into the industry. Do you think that with the technological progress nowadays and with all these do-it-yourself tools and all this information that you can get even for free online, even you can Google how to make a movie, just to say like this, do you think is it harder for creative people to get into this industry because it is more crowded, because it is more, it's full of people, creative people, and
you think they know what
there's a big competition out there? What do you think about that? Was it easier for you to get, whereas would it be harder for one of us to get nowadays into this industry?
Okay. For me, I was privileged to work with a big broadcast company, London Weekend Television, after I'd worked in films for a bit, and I'd worked with some great people in the film business in a very short time. But I realized the film business gives you discipline. There's no doubt that you work on a movie set. If anybody's going on a movie set, it's quite different from a television studio. It's extremely tough. You have to be very, very aware of the pecking order and your respect for the people around you. There's an awful lot of jargon, a lot of what I call shit flicking. Nobody wants to take responsibility because there is huge money involved. In television, people are a bit more friendly. It's a day-to-day job, and I liked that feeling. And so working at London Weekend Television, it was a big broadcast company that trained people. You could go in and learn. I didn't go in that way, but I went in and there were jobs to be had. Okay, now, these days, there are very few training schemes. One of the great failings of the business is that the training for broadcast television is disappearing. There are thousands of people apply for these, 4 jobs go at the BBC. And there are 1,000 people applying for them. Well, how do you choose? Do you write in green ink? I don't know. What's the way of getting in? But what you do have that you never had before is the way of broadcasting your material. So you can show your talent, and you need to show your talent without waiting for somebody to ask you to do it for them. And that's what you have to do now. If you want to be out there, you want to make your mark, you've got to start, and if you're a student, you've got to do it now. When you're here as a student, I would say, and I say this to acting students, from your 3rd year at drama school, you are now a professional actor. You have to behave like one and further your career every single day. You need to make contacts, you need to climb over other people because there are not enough jobs, but you have to find a way. If you want it, you've got to be hungry and you've got to fight for it.
So what would be the perfect candidate that would, drop your CV to yourself and would want to get into this industry? So what would be the set of skills that we need to have?
Okay, if you were as a journalist, a broadcast journalist?
Yes, just getting into television and the creative industry in general.
Well, that is quite a broad brushstroke of question. I'd be struggling to give you all the different points because they're different.
But let's take what you do now as a director. Let's just take that as an exemplar. You're a young student. Who knows whether you want to be a director at 18 or 19? Some people do, to be fair. They know absolutely that is what they're going to end up doing. I mean, I did at 18. I knew absolutely I was going to be a journalist and I was going to be on television as a journalist.
Right.
Not everyone makes that decision. But let's say you say director. What are the skills that you need beyond just the hard skills and know what a camera is? What are the skills that you need to acquire in order to demonstrate that you have director qualities?
You have to make a film. You have to make a film that you care about. And I think you need a show reel. Actors all need show reels. They need show reels because nobody will believe they can act. Even in an audition, you look different in an audition than the way you look on screen as an actor. So as a director, if you want to direct, that is my goal. I am going to be a movie director. I'm going to be a television director, mostly movie directors, because most people who want to direct a movie, and they often already want to make their own films because they've done it when they're younger. You're teenagers, at school, whatever. The video, iPhones are fantastic. You can make anything on an iPhone now. So I would say you must make your own film. You have to beg, borrow, steal the kit. You have to raise the money. You have to persuade, beg friends, skilled people to work for you, with you, and you have to get it out there. You have to make a great short film, and then you have to make another one, because one's probably not enough now. It's not simply. But while you're doing that, you have to look for opportunities to get your foot in the door anywhere in whatever.
There was a word you used there, a really important one.
Did I?
Passion.
Passion.
Because a lot of people think it's a bit of a funny word, don't they? Passion. Oh, yeah, you know, you're wearing your heart on your sleeve. Don't be so passionate about it. You know, be a bit more thinky about it. But actually, I'm with you on this, that actually passion is what is really required if you want to be in this public space. Otherwise, why would anyone want to be interested in what you've got to present?
When you make, if you like, when you go up to direct something, not only do people want to see your work, but they want to understand that you can persuade people to do your bidding. You can treat them with respect, not authority. I mean, yes, authority, but not autocracy. You have to persuade people. You have to work with a lot of people with big egos, but you have to be convincing. And passion, absolutely, is something you have to have. Because if you didn't, you just fall on the floor. It's very, very hard work.
It's high energy stakes. I remember being on the set of Eastenders with you, and the energy that was coming from you, it was high energy all evening. You can't afford to let up.
No, I think that's why lots of directors collapse, sort of, and you know, they leave the business quite early because they just run out of steam. Their Duracells run out. Actually, you have to be able to deal with people. You have to love working with people. You have to like the team game. Nobody in the business survives without being able to play the team game. And to be a director, you have to find the courage to say, and sometimes it's all you need to say is, okay, off we go. If you've done your planning, if you've kept people on board, these are the skills you need. It is the ability to communicate with respect, with energy, sometimes with a bit of temper, and trust the people around you. Choose good people if you have the choice. But you're right, passion is probably number one on the list.
So in a strange sort of way, it's much more collaborative than being in the movies where the director is
auteur.
king.
Yes, yeah,
Auteur.
yeah.
This is a much more collaborative exercise.
Absolutely it is. We have to pick up a script, a series of scripts. We have to read them, understand where they came from, where they're going to, who knows what. Of those 60 characters or whatever they are, we have to know in our scripts where they've been, where they're going, how they know, what they don't know, what other directors are doing, why we're shooting stuff. And we are part of a seamless operation, so the audience never notice the change from one director to another. So that's quite, what shall I say, that's a skill, but it's not complicated. It just means I don't make my show reel by doing something astounding with a camera that doesn't have any relevance to what the story is. I have to take the script and tell the story.
I noticed when I was on the set that they were saying to every 5 minutes, Nick, what am I meant to do? Nick, what am I meant to do? It was like everyone was focused on what Nick thought they had to do. Is that the job?
Yeah, that's what directing is. But then I know once they know what they have to do, I can't tell them how to do it. Well, I can tell them what to do, but they have to find, we're talking directors and cameraman, they have to understand, they need to use their skills and instincts, which they do, to tell the story. I mean, the actors learn the material, but I'm the one who is visualized, and indeed the writer has placed, you know, I can read a script now, I know exactly what the writer means, if they're good, if they've written it well. So I don't have to worry, because it'll be clear to the actor too what they have to do. It's only when it's not clear do I get all those questions. But then I have to also work out all the geometry, we call it the blocking of the scenes. So in those scenes, for example, that you partook in, I think we had 25 different members of the cast all sitting in a freezing cold street, objecting to whatever it was in the rain, and it was freezing cold. And it's in those times you really need to, you have to do the homework, but you have to understand, and the job of the director is to drive everybody, lead them kicking and screaming through the misery, and make sure that whatever's on the screen is what the writer wants and what the producer wants, because that's the job.
I was just wondering, because I was thinking about Eastenders and the history of Eastenders. It lasted for so long, to be honest, and it's still Britain's favorite. If we think about soap operas, if we think about entertainment, like family entertainment, I hope I'm not wrong about this, saying that it's one of Britain's favorite.
Yeah, well, if you're BBC, you'll
What-
say it is the Britain's
Yeah.
favourite. If you're ITV, you'll
Exactly.
say
Coronation
yeah,
Street.
Coronation Street is,
Yes.
Then I was just wondering, what do you think, what was the ingredient that made EastEnders last and still be the nation's favorite, some sort of nation's favorite?
Great
Good question.
characters.
Good question, though, isn't it?
Yeah,
I mean,
it is.
Yeah.
Great
What's
characters.
That, the characters.
The characters, when the writing is matchless when it's good, but it can be dreadful. But soap opera is likened to watching your neighbours misbehave, watching your friends misbehave, and do things that you couldn't even imagine yourself doing and you watch them from the safety of your armchair. It's Schadenfreude, other people's misfortune. It's fantastic. It's a human trait to enjoy other people's misfortune and their triumphs as well. And it makes us feel a little bit better about ourselves. And when it's well written, well crafted, and of course EastEnders is about London as London, that's why it works. And it's also familiarity. If you, somebody said to me today, they'd been watching it since they were 1.5. Then if you watch it since you're 1.5, you grow up with it, you're so familiar with it. Getting the opportunity to create something like that is like hen's teeth. So rare do people get that opportunity. And of course, if you make stuff and broadcast on the internet, how do you build your audience to 5, 6, 7 million people every night? How do you do that now? It is only the big broadcast companies that can do it, unless you can get 1 million hits on YouTube. It's a very difficult and complicated chemistry. But EastEnders has survived because it's continued to attract good writing, new writing, great characters, constant story changes. It can be boring. I absolutely acknowledge it can be dreadful sometimes. Because it's boring, because things are repetitive, and every nuance of everybody's behaviour is examined in minute detail, and the most unlikely things will happen. But sometimes it has to go down to go up again, and that's the same with everything in life, isn't it?
It does have this quality of trying to take real issues affecting real people and translate them into topical drama, if you like, for want of a better phrase. I mean, the storyline we worked with was about developers moving into the traditional marketplace and turfing people out and making money, which is familiar to everybody. So it has that quality of trying to constantly find those storylines, some more shocking than others.
Yes.
Rape or domestic violence, all of those have been worked through on EastEnders.
Yes.
Is that also part of its appeal? It's not just flippant.
No, it isn't. It isn't, and I think that would be true for almost all the returning dramas. That those social issues are incredibly important to the producers, and they will be mapped way in advance. I mean, I'm particularly proud about the character Stacey, Lacey Turner, who is just extraordinary natural actress, who is happiest when she's doing in EastEnders, when she's in EastEnders. She left EastEnders, came back, and she said, "I am so happy to be back here. This is where I belong." But she plays somebody with a bipolar condition, and I remember a few years ago doing a breakdown she had. I'm not unfamiliar through family contact with mental illness, and I am proud that that issue was brought into an arena where people could examine that raising it above the parapet. I used to produce Jasper Carrot back in the 90s with another hat on. And Jasper used to do stand-up. As you know, he became famous. I've known him since the 70s. And he brought up Alzheimer's in a routine. And I was the producer at that time. And he told a joke about Ronald Reagan. He said, Ronald Reagan came on television in America and he told the world he had Alzheimer's. And 2 weeks later, he came on television and told the world he had Alzheimer's. I got a stack of mail as the producer like that. People absolutely outraged that Alzheimer's should be treated flippantly. And I could understand because some of their stories were appalling. And of course, but Jasper's theory, which I think he's right, is you raise it above the parapet, it may be shocking, but then people get a chance to examine it and they talk about it, and it becomes less frightening, more understanding. And now, of course, we're all immensely anxious about Alzheimer's. I personally am very anxious about it. I'm nearer than most. But I still, I think that the issues are very, very, very important to soap opera.
Is that what keeps soap opera real, rather than just being gossip?
Yeah. You have your gossip. You have some funny stuff, some lightweight stuff. I mean, there's an amazing one that Eastenders have just put on about, I don't think it's transgender, it is not transgender, but, there is a transgender story coming up, a big transgender story, because they've just got a transgender actor coming on the series as a character.
You heard it here first.
Pardon?
You heard it here first.
I saw it actually on Twitter yesterday.
Ah, right, heard it here second.
But I'm sorry, I've lost the word.
So the
character who dresses as a woman,
Yeah.
Roger Sloman, who dresses as a woman. And I mean, I haven't seen that on a soap before. But it's really interesting and extraordinary because it wasn't treated flippantly. All that emotion that goes hand in hand with those complex human behavioural issues was handled brilliantly and beautifully performed. And it will go on for a while, and we will get used to it and understand perhaps a bit more about it and make those people that really deal with those issues more comfortable in themselves.
Inevitably, as a journalist, as a working journalist, you're always confronted by the issue of ethics when you're reporting on things. And one assumes that on a show like EastEnders, too, ethics is a key part of the decision-making framework. I mean, how do people, juggle those really difficult issues and when to know when not to go too far? You've already suggested it by saying that we won't show a knife, we won't show the gory bits.
Yeah.
But where does the balance come on a programme like that, which is shown at
pre-watershed,
pre-watershed,
Yeah.
and family viewing?
The BBC have a department called EdPol, editorial policy, and if there is anything that may be ambiguous in terms of what you can show, if it may be dangerous, if it may upset a greater part of the audience or even a smaller part of the audience, EdPol are supposed to read all the scripts, and if they feel things are risky, then they will suggest, unfortunately, because they tend to be solicitors, lawyers, rather than writers, they'll suggest alternatives. But if something is likely to be, for example, I just would say this, I filmed the killing of Hev. There was a character called Hev, Cheryl Ferguson, brilliant, and I had to film this murder. And she was hit on the head with an ornament, an ashtray off a mantelpiece. And when I shot it, and it looked nothing until you added the sound effect, which was really frightening. And unfortunately, and I was very upset, EdPol insisted they took the sound away, which reduced it to a moment of people's imagination, because you didn't actually see her struck on the head. You can't show that. But that's an Ed Poll decision. Those things are difficult. And the same with controversial issues, you know, what you can do and what you can't do. It's decided by executive producers, and, you know, we just tell the story. I say we just tell the story. Our job is to tell the story as sensitively as possible, and then we present our gifts of work, these things. We have viewings with the executive producer, and we are judged. But it's not just us that are being judged, it's the whole story structure, concept. Does it work? What else does it need? What do we need to take away? So,
questions from the floor, please, to Nick. Paul, you've got your hand up. Is there?
Just a question about the kind of mechanics of making an episode of EastEnders. Can you talk through from when you get a script to when you deliver the episode, how many days that is, and what happens?
sure. I get 4 weeks to prepare 2 hours worth of filming. And in the first week, before I start, I get some reading days, 3 reading days, where I have to read this, what is called a story document, which is, it is pages and pages and pages of summaries of all the episodes leading up to the ones I'm shooting. So I have to wade through these to try and understand what my episodes are about. And I read the ones about my episodes. And then I read the first, I think I get the second or third draft of my scripts. The drafts run to 5 or 6 drafts. And I read them in week 1, and I then put notes in and give them back to the script editor and the producer, and they read that particular they read my notes plus the producer's notes, and they get incorporated into the next drafts. So meanwhile, I'm looking for locations with a location manager. I go to the art department to discuss the sets. And in the second week of preparation, I am starting to think about how I'm going to shoot it. I've probably decided a few things already, because these set pieces have been, car crash. Oh my goodness, that's complicated. Well, I need to work that out quickly because lots of questions are going to be asked. Then I've got another draft of the script to read. It may have changed radically, not just because of my notes, but because the producer feels they want to change the thrust of the story or which way it travels. By the end of week 2, I should have a white shooting script. Sorry, it's irrelevant the colour, but that's what it is. It's a shooting script. So I've now got 2 weeks in theory to make all the shots, work out all the blocking of all the scenes, about 30 to 40 scenes each half hour. It's about 1,500 shots if I was going to script every shot, and some of my colleagues do that. I don't do that anymore. I cheat a bit because I'm getting old. But at the end of the third week, I should have figured out more or less everything, but probably haven't. The fourth week, I have a lot of meetings with my crew who want to know what my choices will be and how I'm going to shoot stuff. And we do a recce where I explain everything. And if I'm really good and I've done my shot listing, there'll be a script with all my shots in it. But usually that's battle stations to the very last minute. And we start shooting in week 5 of my contract. Can be anything from 9 days through to, I think the longest I've done is about 20 days. That, of course, has extended my contract hugely. But unfortunately, we shoot 6 days a week. And that's really, really hard work. And unfortunately, we start at 8 in the morning and we finish at 7 at night. Or if we're shooting nights, we start at midday and work till midnight. And sometimes you can have a whole run of nights, so you get what we call clawback. So you start late, say you start at 2 and finish at 2 in the morning or 1 in the morning, and then each day you start an hour earlier. So it completely screws your head up. That's the sort of thing that happens, not often. But of course in the winter, you're working in the dark more than in the daytime. So that's the sort of rough plan of how we go about making it.
All of that requires a huge amount of communication, doesn't it? I mean, between different players. I mean, one of the things that students often forget is how important it is to keep communicating amongst the team.
I think that's what you have to do. I think, and my wife gets furious with me because I say, you didn't tell me that, but you didn't tell me that. You did, but how am I meant to know that? And that's, whatever it is. And I think communicating, the ability to, even if it sounds like you're kind of showing off what you've done, if you tell people what you've done and they tell you what they've done, then it's the oil in the wheel, it's the oil in the machine. Communicate all the time. Don't keep it to yourself. And you have to do that. It's a constant conversation between everybody. And you're in the middle of this kind of whirlwind of people asking you questions. But if you've done the homework, and this is absolutely the key to successful anything, doesn't have to be directing. You do the homework, you can stand up with confidence, even if you throw it all away on the day because somebody comes up with a better idea. I always listen to the junior cameramen because they'll often say, why don't you put the camera there? Why didn't he do that? And you go, oh, that's a good idea, I'll do that. And you steal from people who are talented around you. But if you don't do the homework, you are just lost. I didn't go to it, but Ridley Scott talked to the Directors UK. Do people know anybody want to be a director? Anybody going to be a director here? I'm very quiet at the moment. Anybody going to be a director? You will have to join something called Directors UK, which will collect money on your behalf for the work you've done. Not like the principal payment, but for residual and repeat fees. And it's an organisation just for screen directors, and Ridley Scott came to talk about whatever film he's just made. And he said exactly what I've just said. And he wasn't the first or the last to say it, but he does all his movies are storyboarded, which gives him the confidence to go on set and say, right, we'll start with this. You stand there, I'm going to put the camera there, let's see how it works. And then an actor will say, but could I do this? Could I try that? Could I do that? And he goes, yeah, sure. And you just throw the homework away, but you've done it. And you just know you've got this fantastic fallback. Do the homework, always do the homework. It's been the watchword, and keep it simple.
I just had a question, because you mentioned that
This might come in over your head so they can pick up the sound.
you mentioned that it was hard to build an audience unless you were in mainstream media, like TV. But nowadays, there's a lot of people on YouTube, for example,
Yeah,
who are building up audiences of literally millions of people,
terrific.
and are even getting funding from certain companies to do short films and things like that.
Yep.
To what extent do you think that is a threat to mainstream media?
I think it's a
TV,
benefit. I don't see it as any threat at all. I think it's a fantastic benefit. It means that the mainstream media have to try harder to win. They have to be more inventive. And I think there's a generation, it's your generation, not mine, that is completely at home with watching their entertainment or partaking in their entertainment on a smaller screen. That, I know people who don't own televisions, they just own iPads and computers, and that's where they get all their information, all their pleasure from the media. And so I truly believe that there will be slowly a revolution in the way we get our entertainment, and if you know how to build your audience, you're a winner. I don't know. But I was having this conversation yesterday with somebody who's got this fantastic comedy show. They just can't get a commission for it on any of the main channels. So they've got a website. So now they need social media to make people look at their website. And if they can build that audience, get that, people talking, they have some chance of then monetizing what they're doing and getting money. And as you say, well, just as you described, getting people to invest in them, that sort of thing. I think it's great. Bring it on. And of course, fantastic opportunities for people like you, all you guys here, to not to have to wait before your material is out there for people to view.
Definitely. One last question. Yes.
You mentioned that it was about who you knew. I mean, how would you recommend getting to know people that are high up in the industry? I mean, right now, I wouldn't be able to get in contact with Martin Scorsese's or anybody along those lines. I mean, how would you recommend getting in contact with these people?
How badly do you want to get in touch with people?
Pretty badly.
Okay. Pretty badly is probably not enough.
I mean, I don't want to end up stalking these people.
No.
Or breaking the law.
No. Nobody would ask you to do that. I think you'd probably be just wouldn't bother get a job. I think what you have to recognise that we're in a business. This is an industry, and successful people in industry are not inhibited by the possibility of rejection. You have to be prepared to kiss a lot of frogs before you get the prince. So you have to work just as actors have to work on their building connections, making a contribution to their career. You have to sit down, you have to figure out who you want to talk to, and if you can't talk to them, talk to somebody like them. I'm afraid it's all down to you to be inventive and talk to people in the business. Don't be afraid of rejection. Keep writing letters, keep writing emails, and when they say no or you don't hear anything, write again, and write again, and write again. Phone, see who's on the credit, watch whatever you like. If you watch television or watch movies, look at the credits, see who's there. You're in Britain at the moment, so there are plenty of independent production companies. Can you go and talk to somebody in a production company? Can you show them a film you've made? Are you too frightened to do that, or do you have the courage to do that? I know this is what just like actors, they're just struggling to get noticed in a small market. You've got to do the same. You've got to fight your corner. It's not very helpful. It doesn't sound very helpful, but people do it. There's no easy route. Nobody's going to do it for you. You have to make your own connections. And to do it, you have to be personable, polite, respectful, and never give up. You've got to do your homework. Find out who the people are you need to talk to make that next step, who those producers of short films, distributors of short films, if you've made one, who are they? Or who's funding short films? And get your name in front of them. Give them a convincing argument why they should choose you instead of all those other people.
Persistence and resilience, I think, are the key words, aren't they?
Thank you.
Nick, it's been really super to have you here. You've given some down-at-earth sound advice. You've told us second about the transvestite storyline, but that's all right. We're still grateful.
Transgender.
We're grateful for you having come to Middlesex and to share your wealth of experience with us. So, without further ado, a big round of applause, please.
Thank you.